And started off with DraftKings. Then we will go to FanDuel. We'll build a few lineups out here. See where we're at. We'll sim them. The single lineup sim gives us instant feedback on these. It's very exciting stuff. And we do everything we can to build the best lineups out. If at the very least, look, it's Wednesday. These aren't the lineups you're going to have for Sunday because things will change, but it gives you an idea of what's feasible or not. And what I mean, Greg, is like last week, right? Saquon Barkley, I was looking at the power sweep, the 150K to first or 150K, 100, whatever it is. I think 100. And I looked at it with Ben yesterday. Barkley had a huge game. He had like 36, 37 fantasy points on DraftKings, but he wasn't in any of the top 3 lineups. So as I was making lineups with the single lineup builder, hand building these, getting the feedback and running them through the sims and running the actual pre-contest sims, I didn't boost Barkley in that spot because I was like, I'm not getting any of him. I'm not getting any of him. And it turned out that as good and incredible as he was, you didn't actually need him. So I think even midway through the week on a Wednesday, that's the type of stuff we can really learn from these type of, processes going into Sunday.
Yeah, and another part of it, at least for Sunday, it would have been one if Barkley had a big game and other running backs didn't have big games, it would have been different. Like I think he was in the Millie making winning lineup where that's typically going to be like close to whatever the optimal lineup is for the week. But there were so many good running backs that scored a lot of fantasy points for cheap, like most notably Chase Brown. He was the chalk on the slate last week, but if he ran stuff through our sims, he would show up as the most under-owned player on the entire slate, despite being mid 30%. I forget what the number was, like 30% owned or whatever. But because you had guys like Chase Brown had a really big game, Austin Eckler was solid. I don't even remember some of the other players for Sunday, but Chase Brown was the big one. Barkley, obviously you played him, you were really happy. But if you didn't play him, if you played like the Chase Brown type guys at running back, like you didn't play Chase Brown and be like, shit, I didn't play Saquon Barkley. There was a lot of good running back options.
Exactly. I'm not saying Barkley hurt you. Like you said, he was in some winning lineups. What I'm saying is you didn't actually need him to win in a lot of those single entry lineups either, because Kamara was another one. He was expensive, but who was it? Zach Moss. Who was the other cheap running back? Eckler ended up being like 17 wasn't crazy, but wasn't there one more cheaper, like less expensive running back in the 6K range that popped off?
HN?
Yeah. HN was probably the reason I didn't have a bad week. I hope to not have one this week. So let's do it, man. I started last week with a stack. You tell me where you want to go. And please, Greg, don't do Patrick Mahomes on me again.
So
it actually would have worked out on Monday. It was the best game he's had in like 2 calendar years.
I think it helps that, it could be a talking point for later, but DeAndre Hopkins looked good. DeAndre Hopkins hasn't looked that good in a very long time. And it's hard to know, and also not going to be making a cheap stack here, but it was hard to know how much DeAndre Hopkins had left in the tank, because if Will Levis is your quarterback, like what the hell does it matter where you're doing a wide receiver? He could be tightly covered, he could be wide open, he's not finding you anyway. It turns out DeAndre Hopkins still has a lot left in the tank, and when he has Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, it makes a hell of a big of a difference. So it seems like DeAndre Hopkins is still one of the better wide receivers that we have in the league, and he's definitely someone I'm going to like for GPPs. But where I want to start for this particular slate, Lofty, that I think would be an interesting game to stack, I like the Buccaneers 49ers game. There's some ownership going to Brock Purdy. He's right around 10% owned. Baker Mayfield, the much lesser owned of the two, around 5% ownership. And Baker Mayfield's having a really, really fantastic season. And even without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, he still looked really good against the Chiefs last week. I'll say this as well. If the Buccaneers go for 2 at the end of that game, I think they're somewhat likely to win. I think they more likely win that game than lose if they went for 2 at the end of regulation instead of played for overtime.
I think so too. They had to go for 2. And I like Todd Bowles. I'm a fan of Bowles, but like credit Liam Cohen and Todd Bowles for doing what they did. Like that was a super competitive game. All they had was Cade Otton, but they should have gone for 2. You can't play for the tie when Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are on the other side. And I couldn't agree more. DeAndre Hopkins, man, that dude still looks awesome. And I love it because I'm a huge Hopkins fan. I wish it wasn't with Kansas City, but I love the guy. All right, so what did you decide on?
Yeah, so I want to go. One other thing, too, about DeAndre Hopkins before we go. Do you know what Hopkins' price is this weekend?
Was he like 6K?
He's 5,300 on DK.
53, that's right. Yeah, I looked yesterday and I forgot. Yeah, 5,300.
So
Against Surtain, tough spot.
that's where I think he's important when it comes, because $5,300, it is hard to ignore DeAndre Hopkins this week against Denver Broncos. He's going to be wide receiver I like. But I want to start by looking at that 49ers Buccaneers game and making a Baker Mayfield stack. The wide receivers there are still extremely cheap, and Baker Mayfield looks like he's going to individually play well, regardless of who it is, as his pass catchers. And this is also a game script where he's going to have to throw the football.
Okay. All right. Let's try it. The problem though is like, yeah, his receivers are cheap, but they're also bad. Where are we going to extract any value from outside of Kate Otten?
Yeah, so you go Kate Otten, run backs as well. I like Ricky Pearsall on the other side of the game as a run back. He's also fairly cheap. And then we could start looking at some of the targets and the routes that were run by the cheap Buccaneers wide receivers last week. I know somebody who is a little bit of a disappointment for primetime, but he did come alive later in the game, is Trey Palmer. And I think that could carry over to this week where they might go like, hey, we should probably get the ball to Trey Palmer a little bit more. But there are a number of ways that we could go with the Tampa Bay pass catchers. Kate Otten stands out the most, but I mean, there's also Trey Palmer. Ryan Miller caught a touchdown. So there's ways that I think that you can make good stacks here.
Okay. Lee Price, Surtain let Flowers go off. It doesn't matter when you have a QB like Mahomes or Lamar, they can buy time to get open. No, you're 100% right. But also it's an objectively worse matchup than the Bucks is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
All right. So then I mean, you have to play Otten here. You can't stack Baker without Otten. It's just, to me, it makes no sense.
I like Baker. I like Kate Otten. Wide receiver, there's so many cheap ways to go. I feel the best overall about Trey Palmer, and he's also projected for pretty low ownership. And I was really surprised with Trey Palmer's lack of involvement in the first half of the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But that really changed down the stretch of the game. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before, is I think that's going to have a carryover to this week, where if you consider that Trey Palmer got, I think he had 3 targets or something on the final drive the Buccaneers had after he was mostly uninvolved for the rest of the game. If Baker Mayfield had that kind of confidence to go to Trey Palmer late in the game, also his fantasy outlook's a lot different if he doesn't get tackled on the 1-yard line on the game tying drive. He gets tackled on the 1-yard line, they score after that. But if it's not for that, then I mean, you're looking at a game where he finishes with like 12 fantasy points or something like that. And that looks much better if people are looking at the box score and they see the 5.5 fantasy points. But I like going to Trey Palmer this week, and that's a double stack that I like to start some Baker Mayfield lineups with.
Okay. Then who do you run it back with? Like, do you really want to run it back with just Pearsall?
We could run it back with Ricky Pearsall. That's certainly one option. We don't even have to have a run back, depending what ends up happening with some of the.
I'd rather do you. We really don't have to. I don't like the fact that Jennings is expected back, and if Debo plays, it's like, yeah, sure, there's still no Ayuk, but now it's a lot more. It's a lot more crowded than it was in, say, week 8, and you have Christian McCaffrey back.
Mm-hmm. We could go Debo.
I don't love
that.
Debo
as well. I like that Pearsall is, so there's a lot of unknowns about Ricky Pearsall, most notably that he's a rookie. We've only seen him play in a couple of games, and also he got shot, and he's only played a couple games because of that. But you don't typically see, especially on teams that are this competitive, somebody who is, rookie, all the issues Ricky Pearsall has had, and then immediately comes out, first couple games played 5 targets, 4 targets. I would imagine that role expands as we go forward, and he's more comfortable in the offense and is just overall healthier as well. So I do like Ricky Pearsall as a cheap option. And ultimately, I do think he's going to be ahead of Juwan Jennings in the pecking order for the 49ers going forward. But Debo also is somebody who could be used as a run back. I don't really like the price point on him because $8,300, it's $8,300 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, $6,900. At $6,900 for Debo, actually. I was looking at the FanDuel price there. For DK purposes, yeah, we could go to Debo at $6,900 as well.
All right. And for what it's worth, we have Jennings out in the projections right now. He's going to play.
Yeah.
So that's going to ding Pearsall for sure. Like, I would think it hits him by a couple points. All right. By the way, after this one, we're trying a Justin Herbert stack.
Okay.
We'll
Okay.
see.
And by the way, in the chat, SMP says there's no way Pearsall overtakes Jennings. I think people put a lot of stock into that one game where he just had like the massive outlier game. Almost all of Jennings' stats for the year are from that one game against the Rams where he had 1,000,000 receiving yards. I think he has 3 touchdowns this year. They all came in that game. He's got about half of his receiving yards in that game as well. He doesn't have more than 3 catches in any other game with the team being healthy outside of that one game.
Sure. What, but to me, whether he overtakes him or not is unimportant when Jennings comes back, and it's still like now you have Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, Jennings, and Pearsall. It's a lot of mouths to feed. Either way, um, I'm throwing Alvin Kamara in here. I know he's popular. The volume there is insane. I think you get a dead cat bounce out of this team with Dennis Allen gone, and Rizzi taking over. I think that's his name, the special teams coordinator at head coach. So I want to throw Kamara in here. And also, Greg, I'm just going to throw a cheap defense in as we always do. Let's not worry about that, but let's just throw a cheap defense in. We'll go, let's go.
Patriots against the Bears. I feel like we always just plug
Yes.
in the defense playing the Bears.
Sure. Let's go. I also think, for what it's worth, I think this game sets up really good for the Bears. We can talk about that later, though. But yes, Patriots against the Bears. Let's just throw that in there. Perfectly fine at that price point.
Jordan, add in Debo. You don't have Debo in yet.
All right. Who do you want to go with? I threw Kamara in.
All right. So other potential cheaper options to be going to at running back. Has there been an update on Brian Robinson?
Not yet. We'll know more today.
If he doesn't play, I like Austin Eckler for cheap again at $5,800. Currently not projected for that much ownership. That would change if Robinson's ruled out. But what do we have for average salary remaining there, Jordan? 55?
Yeah, 55.33.
Okay. 55. So we don't want to go too expensive at the running back spot. So I guess our options, we want to go cheaper. We could go Austin Eckler with the hopes that Brian Robinson doesn't end up playing. We could look at James Conner. We could look at Aaron Jones going up against the Jaguars. I know he's the one who projects the best. So maybe we plug in Aaron Jones. Good match for him against the Jaguars. And he's somebody who the Vikings have continued to lean on in Aaron Jones as long as he's been healthy. Just from a projection standpoint, I guess go Aaron Jones over Eckler for now, just because that'll come out with a better sim ROI.
I'm with you. Let's do Aaron Jones. Also, if we didn't have the Patriots defense, for what it's worth, I love DeAndre Swift this week against the Patriots. Agreed. Really good spot. I'll tell you why, by the way, because we like to do this show and provide info while we build lineups. The one thing I like about this is when you look at how this matchup breaks down for the Bears, they can get away with their style of play, because where they really struggle is on the ground for their run defense. Drake May's a rookie coming into this spot. Chicago's secondary is good, but the run defense stinks. The difference there, though, is that the Patriots can't run block for shit. Like, look at Ramondre Stevenson. Had it not been for those touchdowns lately, his efficiency, his numbers are terrible. Him and Antonio Gibson are both bottom 5 in yards before contact per attempt this year. So I think what you can do, given how much Caleb Williams has struggled lately, and now, of course, this is banking on the Bears coaching staff to make the right decisions, which, far be it for me to say that's going to happen. But I would think you just why would you not lean heavily on Swift in this game? So next lineup, we'll try one with Swift. I'm with you on Jones. We have about 5,000 remaining for wide receiver and flex.
Okay, that's not bad. So probably going to want to go one more cheaper wide receiver. Let's see. Really cheap. There's not necessarily a pump. Maybe this is also where we might want to go Pearsall instead of Debo to give us a little bit more money. It would save us $2,500. But if we're going to look, I wonder also, how many tight ends look good on the slate?
Not that many.
Do you like Will Dissly this week? He shows up a lot in our data.
I don't hate Disley. I'm also intrigued by George Kittle if you wanted to put him in flex and get rid of Debo, but um, like George Kittle at 5,800, that's always intriguing. Try the double tight end.
Yeah, because I'm saying you could go Disley in the flex spot, and that would give you a lot of salary savings, which this would change if like more concrete value opens up later. But at least as of right now, this looks like not a terrible double tight end slate. So if you plugged in Disley, then we'd have money to spend up for another wide receiver because I don't really have another punt wide out that I really want to put into this lineup.
Okay. Hayden Hurst was back last week, but only played 14% of snaps.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Always subject to change later on in the week, but then that gives us
I'm not opposed to it.
What at wide receiver there, Jordan? 65 or something? 68. Okay.
I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, and then we could go for 68. If he plays, we've got Drake London. Make ourselves a mini game stack. Drake London and Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, that's fine. Also, I like George Pickens here, projected for a little bit less, but also a lot less ownership. So if you wanted to go Pickens there, I have no problem with that either. All right, so you got a Baker stack with the Debo run back. Let's see, Jordan, run a large contest.
Go London. A little bit more correlation. You get London.
Yeah, go London. 25% to first, large field. What do you think? You and I have not had a negatively simmed ROI lineup since we started doing this show in week 1.
I think this one will come out well.
I'm going to say 41.
I'm going to say 98.
Whoa, look at that.